Well, that took a couple seconds to wake up. But there we are. It's Joy and the other people. But to my mind, there is only joy. Okay, so I was 7 years old when that came out. And joy was a very important part of my 7-year-old childhood. Hey, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are on the planet. Oh man, I am horrified that I just said that, because we may have a couple of guests watching who don't regularly watch. If you're here, Rose and Jessica, thank you for coming. There is no need, but I do appreciate that you accepted the invite. And they have a regular show where I hope I didn't steal this greeting. I think I was doing it for a long time, and you guys happen to be doing it at the same time too. But that is my standard stock start the show shindig. And so, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. And welcome to ADRAMADA, another Dave Rush Ask Me Anything Digital Alchemy. And I am the aforementioned Dave Rush. We are here because we love tech. We love to talk about it. We love to do it. We just love it. And so sometimes it's IT, sometimes it's not IT. Wide-ranging topics because we celebrate technology, from electric cars to electric guitars, music and movies, the synergy of energy, from booting to computing. Boy, that is just right on. We're talking about booting today. Linux to ethics, the chase to space, cyber to fiber, security to electricity, and my all-time favorite toy, Raspberry Pis, to Li-Fi and AI. And we're not afraid to delve into social topics, including religion, sex, politics, and COVID. Keep it clean, keep it classy, and we'll have some fun. Today is Thursday, November 2nd in the year 2023. This is the first time we got together in November, and so you probably know that, I was clean shaven as of last week, but it is no shave November. So 2 days ago, I made sure it was nice and clean shaven, and then I haven't shaved for 2 days, and then this happened. Can't wait to see what's going to happen in the next 28 days. Well, all right, let's do a little bit of this stuff, and then we'll see who's here and do greetings and all that good stuff. I have big news today, besides the fact that it's No Shave November, and I will share that with you as we get a little further in the show and we get a few more visitors. I had some other cool thing. This is National something or other. This is National Deviled Egg Day. Didn't make it into this file somehow, but it's important that you know that, apparently. And it's almost over where I am. It's 7 p.m. Central Time where I am. A week from today, we will continue to do the show at 7 p.m. Central Time, except it'll be Central Standard Time. That means if your part of the world doesn't change clocks this week, then next week for you, the show is going to be an hour later. We fall back here. Right now, it's at midnight UTC, and so it'll be 1 o'clock in the morning UTC. Not like we get a lot of folks who watch at UTC at midnight, but we do. Here, let me finish up this nonsense, because I like this stuff. Trivia. So this, if you don't recognize it, is a 1970 show from Sid and Marty Krofft. This is The Bugaloos. There are 6 major characters in here, the 4 that you see presented before you, including Caroline Ellis, who was born in 1950, making her 73 years old as of just shy of a month ago. She was born October 12th. Martha Ray was in here as the bad guy. I'll get you bugaloos. And we have IQ in there, and Harmony and Courage, John McIndoe, Wayne Laria, and Don Philpott. Billy Barty, the not tall person. I don't know what to call people anymore. Shoot. I don't know. The politically correct term escapes me. But anyways, you know him from a million other roles. I don't know if he was in The Wizard of Oz as a Munchkin, but he's a little person. There you go. That's the right phrase. He played Sparky the Firefly in here. They were on from 1970 through 1972. They only shot 17 episodes, and I was looking at the cast over the entire 2 years, something that you could not say of a show that's existed for the last 2 years anywhere in the world. The entire cast stayed the same. There were no substitutions. Nobody dropped out. Nobody came in. It was the same dozen or so people. So, if you are new to this, or if you're watching on the archive, we have a Discord server. We would love if you would come over and join and help swell our ranks. Here is the invitation to the ADRAMADA Discord server. And while I'm looking at that, let's see who all has joined. Tullowit, of course, here 3.5 hours early. Thank you, Tullowit. And thank you for all of the other things that you've done for us lately and long term. Tullowit is the only person that I let in on the big unveil that I'm going to do for you guys tonight because it was necessary. He's our friend, he's my moderator, and so much more. Joey Quetzal. Joey Quetzal, I posted the topic of today's show a couple of days ago, and Joey Quetzal, who's a longtime supporter, follower, participant of my shows and my old boss's shows and all that other stuff, he appears and disappears like a summer breeze. And he said, "Oh man, I'm doing some of that. I want to watch your show and learn more." You're not going to learn more. This is going to be a 30,000 foot overview of PXE booting, but I appreciate that you're here for it, and we will go deeper down the rabbit hole, and we will do it for real in the next. I'm envisioning 3 weeks, 4 weeks tops. I've got a full schedule laid out for the next 3 to 4 weeks, so it's going to happen here fairly quickly. But thank you for being here, Joey. Good to see you again. Our Mayan. It's Mayan or the other one down there? Sorry. These are discussions that we got into on old shows. Joey would come up and everybody would guess his heritage based on his name. Incan, Mayan, whatever. So sorry for abusing you, my good friend. Jason Helms here. Hope everybody is doing good, and likewise to you. I hope that interview does better things than you are expecting from it. You know, it's tough to bring in good people, and good people don't always know everything that an employer wants, but they're willing to take you on and teach you the ropes that you don't already know. So I'm not giving up hope for you. I am with Tullowit, casting up prayers for you. Show them the ropes. You know, I've been using that term all of my life, or these 6 decades, and only recently did I learn what it meant. I was watching a documentary on the American yacht, the presidential yacht, which is a big multi-masted square-rigged sailor that has hundreds of rigging ropes for managing all of the sailors. And whenever they bring somebody new on board, these are sailed by the U.S. Naval Cadets, there is just this enormous rack of ropes that go to the various places on the ship. And that's one of your first jobs before you ever get on the ship. You study the ropes, where they're hung and where they're attached to and what they do. And so that's where the phrase "show them the ropes" comes from. I know that's important to you. Patricia Grace is here. Ho nerd and hi nerds. You look like Jolly St. Nick by that time. I did that 2 years ago. I stopped shaving neatening it. Obviously, I've always had a beard. But I think I stopped around June or July. By the time December rolled around, I was a full-fledged Santa Claus, because I did that year because I played Santa Claus for a kid group. Oh, are you watching this shirt? I couldn't get the camera to do everything I wanted to do, so ever make a mistake? Let's make them birds. Yeah, they're birds. I love Bob Ross. He is, a true ray of sunshine and mildness in the world. It is a great loss when we lost Bob Ross. Who else be here? Blush. All right, back to notes. Did that. Okay, so let's do this. We click that. No, not more bugaloos. So last week, we did a primer on SE Linux. What is it, who's using it, and why, and a few tech steps, not a lot. I did some testing this week, right after the show, and SE Linux is up and running like a champ on Rocky Linux, running on Raspberry Pi, runs on regular Rocky Linux for x86 platform. But for that reason, we are ready to rock and roll in the next, as I said, I got shows lined up for the next 3 and 4 weeks. So we're going to do a full-fledged SE Linux show. Today, we're going to stick with the primer motif. We're going to lay the groundwork to understanding PXE booting. It's fun. It's a useful tool in corporate, educational, and industrial environments, in high-performance computing, HPC, and we will build a show around that. But that is the topic du jour. There's an interesting thing. Bonus. Not only are we going to talk about PXE booting tonight, but there is a CompTIA objective for the Linux Plus course. The current XK0005, it's in Domain 1. It's Objective 1.1, Summarize Linux Fundamentals, and there's a big list of sub-objectives under there. Under boot sources, we have Pre-boot Execution Environment, PXE. So I posted this on CompTIA Reddit, inviting anybody who is interested in pursuing Linux Plus to get this part down and out of the way. We're going to go way deeper than you ever needed to know for the show, but it'll be cool. Upcoming show. So I talked with Scott earlier this week, and we put a firm date on it. Next week, ADRAMADA will have its first guest SME, Scott Jernigan. He and I are going to do a show together, triggered by his experiences he had traveling recently as he experimented with Wi-Fi versus 5G versus 4G. He dug down the rabbit hole to learn some of the upcoming XG environments, 10G and stuff like that. I've done some of the same research, and so we're going to show together. The current target is 1 week from today, Thursday, November 9th, and it's not a target now. He and I have settled on it unless something happens to one of us. I'm not sure we're going to get enough sun here in Texas for the rest of the season to make sun tea, so I'm on my last couple of glasses of sun tea that I made a few days ago, just before the cold came in. Okay, well, let's talk tech news of the week. And we'll start with slides, eh? No, that was silly. Goodness gracious. There we go. You may have seen this slide a week ago. It's because I'm going to give you a weekly update until something right happens. So I ordered a Raspberry Pi 5, 3 of them. I ordered 3 Raspberry Pi 5 special power supplies, and having watched the early adopters and the people who got the early ones, if you really want to do this thing justice, it needs coolers. So I ordered the coolers the other day. Nothing is shipped yet. Also, in tech news of the week, a study by the Texas Public Policy Foundation. They happen to be in Texas. I don't think they're particularly Texas-focused or Texas politics-focused. They just happen to be in Texas, from what I was able to read about them. They took a look at EV vehicle charging. Now, I'm not a real big fan of EVs, but I try and stay open-minded about it. My biggest problem with them is twofold. One, I'm used to a vehicle with a lot of range. I'm not sure my body has that range anymore. Maybe I should dispense with that. But my diesel Volkswagen will do 700 miles if I'm not pounding it, and 600 if I do pound it, certainly in the high fives. And the fact that an EV cranks out 300 and is very proud of that just drives me nuts. And don't get me wrong, I took the Jeep out last week. It's a Jeep with a really big 5.7 liter engine. It doesn't get much mileage on a good day, about 16 miles a gallon. And I went up to a gig, I mentioned this in the show last week, in Dallas, dragging 2,500 pounds worth of trailer, maybe a little more than that, maybe close to 3,000. My mileage was somewhere between 7.5 and 9.5 miles a gallon. I didn't have 200-mile range in that thing. So maybe I would count my blessings if I had an EV vehicle that did 300, but I think if it was dragging 3,000 pounds, definitely not. It'd probably go way under. Anyways, so this, and those are my two biggies with that. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I guess that's one of them. The other biggie is I am not a big environmentalist. I think we should take care of the earth, but I don't get aggressive about it. It's just not my cup of mud. But I am concerned with the impact of lithium mining, how it's done, how badly it leaves the earth chemically scarred, the people that they have doing it, the threats to their life and their health. And so I got a problem with that. We need better. Nevertheless, now we get into this latest thing. So this public policy think tank took a look at the costs of charging your EV. And all they did was strip out one factor, and that is the government subsidies that go into manufacturing and charging these things. If you didn't have the rest of the U.S. helping to pay for your EV charge, I hope you're not watching this, Scott, because you're going to fight me tooth and nail on it. The equivalent is $17.33 per gallon if this was a gas vehicle and didn't have those same subsidies. So there you go. Do with it what you will. There's all kinds of news about it. It's been in all kinds of news outlets. I picked it up late in the week. I heard it a few times early in the week, and then it dawned on me, and you know what, that's tech news, so we ought to get into that. Here's some real tech science news. Love this. In recent years, lots of scientists doing experiments that involved directly or indirectly evaporation have been surprised to discover that the evaporation rates that they're getting are much higher than what they expect based on the heat that they're introducing into their experiments. And what they discovered is that light, not heat, but light, has as much an impact on surface evaporation equal to, and in some cases up to 2 times higher than heat-induced evaporation. MIT did a study. They did lots of research on there. It's not perfect. It's not always work, but and I don't know what the impact of this down road is going to be. It's just a fascinating piece of early science. So I got a big kick out of that. This next news, very sorry that our good friend Andre de Goyert is not here, because this is going to have some direct impact on his world. He is in Holland, Netherlands, not Denmark. all the different names that it goes by. But this is really interesting because this is scientific and it's legalistic. So the study was conducted on wind farms that are mounted in the sea, but it has the same impact on land. And it goes something like this. When you set up a wind turbine, the air that passes through it becomes highly disturbed, and it can reduce the smooth airflow, which is necessary to make turbines turn, as much as 20% within 50 kilometers downrange due to what's called the wake effect, the turbulence that occurs in the wake of a wind turbine when the wind passes through it. And this turbulence reduces production of the affected turbines in the wake. Now, we've got a couple turbine farms here that I drive past several times a year, and they're really big with hundreds. I drove through them not long ago and said, there's got to be 3,000 here. And then I went online to look it up. Turns out that U.S.-wide, there's only about 3,000. So there's probably 700 or 800 in what I thought was 3,000. But either way, okay, so here's the impact of this. If you are going to set up a wind farm and use turbines, an impact of as much as 5%, a negative impact because of wake turbulence, can make the project not cost effective. So there's techno problem number one. Techno problem number two, there is almost zero maritime law. And I'm not a big, let's get more law, guys. Man, I'm so far away from that. But I find it interesting. So there is little or no maritime law that has any impact on the disturbing of air from this wind farm as it might impact a downwind wind farm. And they have a couple really big ones in the Netherlands with a third one ready to come online, and there's one in Norway right now that is going to have dramatic impact on that construction. It's being reevaluated just because of this. It's going to have to be some individual national negotiating, and maybe some maritime law will come out of this, but that's going to be really, really complicated law, huh? All right, one more piece of tech news, and then we'll come back and see what your comments were and add to it and from it. Every year, Linus Torvald releases a new kernel of Linux. We're currently operating on 6.5, 6.6 is out in, call it beta, and 6.7 will be out obviously shortly thereafter, within a year thereafter. He develops and improves the kernel. It's not an operating system. The kernel is how the operating system thinks and works. And then we add pieces of it to make it an operating system. We add file systems and we add video subsystems and all kinds of goodies like that. Well, there is this file system. There are file systems native in the kernel right now. Some old ones like ext4, ext2, and even 3 and even 2, and there's some other good ones along the way. This one, Bcache file system, that's the way that's pronounced, is one that the developers have been trying to get Linus, Mr. Torvalds, to incorporate into the kernel. And they've submitted for 3 different times now in 6.4, 6.5, and 6.6, or maybe 6.5 and 6.6, that's what it was. And he has rejected it both times for whatever his rationale is. Well, they've submitted again for 6.7, and he has accepted it. Bcache FS is not the fastest file system out there. It's moderately fast. It comes close to the top speed file systems. But what it also does is incorporate two of the best features of the leading file systems that aren't super high performance, ZFS and ButterFS. And basically, it comes down to performance is better than ext4, a little less than ZFS and ButterFS and XFS, which is the highest performing thing out there. But it adds some features. I made some notes here. It's called Bcache FS because the way it works, we take a stock storage device. It might be an SSD, it might be a spinning drive, and we take a smaller high performance drive and we cache inbound and outbound data on that. So it's kind of like an L1 or L2 or L3 cache to a CPU, except it's for storage. And it also has native support for redundant writes. This is a cow system, modern cow Linux file system. Cow means copy on write. So we can natively duplicate this as well as do this caching system. And that makes it a super amazing, powerful file system. And that's coming out in kernel. Now you can always add this manually yourself after the fact if you're playing Linux. But that is tech news of the week. Come here, hit the right thing here. And Dave came back. Hey, I checked out what you guys were talking about last week. My voice went low. You're right. It picked up on the recording and everything. We know that that's usually a precursor to a crash of OBS. So if I disappear and my voice has gone low, I'll be back up within a minute or so. We got that. At least we have it worked out so that we can recover quickly. I still haven't figured out what it is. I was hoping that the latest round of Windows 11 files, patches, and fixes would have solved it, but it has not. So, I don't know. All right. Let's see what you guys are talking about here. 1 hour later for Tolo. Yep. Paradise does not change times. Given the time of day for you, however, I don't think that's going to be a real negative impact on your life. Thanks. I like that cloud graphic too. Is that also the topic of the day? No. Topic of the day is PXE boot. Uh-oh, something went with my YouTube restarting. Mine didn't. I'm still showing everything smoothly, so. Battery product sourcing, yeah. Look, batteries, when I got out of college as an electrical engineer and a physics major, I've got a bachelor in physics, but I never did anything with it. The job market was all about get me chemical engineers, get me electrical engineers, mostly chemical, and physicists, at least to a master's level, to improve battery technology. The rechargeable batteries of the day were nickel cadmiums, NiCads, and we've gone through a half a dozen generations of batteries since then. And it's still the holy grail. We're always looking for better batteries. Longer lasting, greater capacity, quicker charging. You thought of Scott. It's low again today. Uh-oh. It's low tonight. Should I... Okay, here, I'll tell you what. I will crash this thing. I'll be gone for 1 minute. Say bye-bye. And I should be back. And my voice should be normal. So we're testing this out as a theory. All right, I see myself. How's my voice? That's the important thing, right? Knack. Let's see, that fixes that. Go back to live chat, and we're back in business. Okay, normal. Thank you so much. Hi, back. Yes, voice normal. Good. Hopefully it'll last for the rest of the show, 30 minutes. I watch a podcast almost every week from CIQ, the Rocky Linux folks, and they have a streaming system that I need to ask them about where they dual stream. They stream over to LinkedIn and to YouTube at the same time. And they have this really cool interface for putting YouTube chat posts up on their screen and sharing with them. And so I will contact them this week and ask them what they're doing. We'll give that a try. Next week, we're using Zoom instead of my usual thing since we're getting together with Scott. Okay, well, we've been here half an hour. We got a project to start, but I said there would be news, and so here comes the news. If you haven't already figured this out, some of you may have because of the things you do with me in other parts of the planet and the internetosphere. I am now an independent spirit. I am no longer an employee of Total Seminars. They told me I wasn't fired for cause, and I wasn't the only one who went. A number of my coworkers and pals, we all were cast into the winds. So I'll pick up something new here in fairly short order. I'm going to take my time and picking something fun, but it does give me time to prep the show and do some other things. What does this really mean? It means that I can now do things that I could not do then, mainly because of time. I can't do anything that is competitive with the company or would cost them revenue, but there are things that they don't do and that I can and will do, and you can expect some really interesting stuff from me on a variety of platforms in the very short future. I got stuff under development all over the place, and people that I'm working with. I had this feeling that it was coming for some time now and got my ducks in a row. So I suspect that I might not be there long, huh? I was there for 12 and a half years, almost 13. So, but yeah, things were. No, I am absolutely not part of the Discord server anymore. They yanked my admin credentials and my mod credentials. In fact, they even yanked my my verified credentials. That doesn't seem to be a problem, and so I have verified credentials. I am the same as every other user on there, but I have no power, no authority. I can't see the secret channels that we all set up. Of course, I can go over to the Batcave, and I can go to ADRAMADA and do more things there, but I am just a regular contributor on the old company web server. And of course, you saw on the Discord server, and you saw the some of the things that they have canceled there, basically because I was doing them all, I think, and I'm not there to do them anymore. When they break ties with somebody, when somebody becomes a former, they break ties. Man, you should see how fast all of my worlds got turned off. And that's fine. So I joined my brother Scott in being a former totalitarian. And, I'm going to miss it. I had 11 very happy years there. I worked there for almost 13. But there are some wonderful folks that I've worked with, and I'm really going to miss there. All right. Well, let's get on to... Did you, Patricia? Sure. I kind of did that on purpose, thinking that they might not catch it. Maybe they'll leave this account alone because it's not DRushTX. But they were on top of it like like flies on rotting rice. Is that the phrase? It'll have to do. Yeah, I'm not going to write a book. I have written a lot of stuff over the years, and I have learned, because they simply cannot tell you this enough, that I am just not a good writer. I am a contributor. I write. I make mistakes, but I make a lot less mistakes than I did in the early days because I reread what I wrote, and there's always grammatica and all that gets Grammarly, but I'm just not that great of a writer. I can write technical manuals. I'm a technical writer, but I am not a book writer. So
but I can write a fairly decent script. I'm operating from one now, at least kind of sort of. All right, well, let's do some nonsense here and have a little bit of fun. We're going to talk about PXE booting, PXE, Pre-Boot Execution Environment, more understandable by a more recent name. You'll write it, huh? Okay, done. It used to be called NetBoot, and before that, EtherBoot. And so let's do a little slideshow here. I'll get you, bugaloos. I'll have to go through all this. So this is a stock, normal desktop computer. It's a laptop. It's even a, to a degree, a tablet or phone. And I want to look at the boot process and then get into the PXE boot process. So the boot process starts with having bootable files on a storage device. Could be an SSD or a hard drive or a micro SD card or a flash drive or whatever. And we power the computer up and it goes through post and all that happy stuff. And at some point it says, okay, hard drive controller, storage controller, we're working with you. It is your job to reach out to the hard drive and we're going to control you and we're going to tell you to look for some stuff. And if you find it, great. We want you to start reading that stuff off of the storage device, pass it through the storage controller, through, this is weird, through the CPU to the memory controller circuit, the MCC memory controller, and then into RAM. Okay, now we got a bootable operating system in RAM, and then it's going to get read back out of RAM to the CPU for execution. The key here that I want us to focus on is there are wires that go from the storage controller to the storage device, and there are wires that go from the storage controller to the CPU. The CPU doesn't know that it's a storage controller. It knows that it has made a request to a device and said, send me data. And then that device operates quasi-autonomously and says, I'll get you that data. And it does its thing. It goes and finds a source of data. And then it sends them through the wires to the CPU. Cool? So PXE booting says, same process, except instead of using a local storage controller and a local storage device, we're going to use a network interface card. The CPU doesn't know that it's a network interface card. There are wires that connect the CPU to some device that says, I'll get you the data. And the CPU says, good, I don't care what you are. You send me data, I'm a happy person. And in the meantime, then, of course, the NIC says, well, I'm not going to get the boot files from anywhere on this local computer. I'm going to reach out on the network and I'm going to get bootable files from some server out on the net. This is a really old add-on card, about 1 million years old. It's a really cool card. I was actually going through, when I cleaned out my office, I had kind of a museum there of old technology. Okay, when I say museum, I have a box full of old parts that we sometimes use for photographs when we needed to show something vintage. This thing has a floppy controller on it, serial port controllers, parallel port controllers. This is an old, can I get a good view of that? Yeah, there we go. Hard drive controller. So this thing is plugged in. I got wires going to the hard drive, and I got wires down here on the bus going to the CPU. So when it's time to boot this computer, CPU contacts these things through some wires on this side, let's say. He says, okay, I know how to talk to hard drives. I'll go to the hard drive. I'll start pulling data off of there. And they're going to come through these wires, and then I'm going to pass them through to CPU and to the memory controller and so forth. So again, CPU doesn't know that this is a hard drive controller. It just knows that it called this box, this device, and said, get me boot files, get me an operating system. And this device said, got you covered, mate. See that empty socket right there? We're going to come back and visit that in a moment. Okay, this one. So let us replace that hard drive controller with a network interface card. This is an old guy, but he's got an RJ45. This is an old 10 base T NIC, and it's really old. You can see all these switches that you had to set for various parameters and all kinds of goodies. And when you bought this thing back in the day, this is probably about a 1986 unit. There we go. This thing says, I don't know anything about getting bootable files off the network, but I could if you will just open up your wallet a little bit and buy me a chip that goes in here. I didn't think I would ever use this stuff again out of that old museum. But here we go. Said chip. This is a ROM, a read-only memory, and I plug it into there, and suddenly this thing says, I get it. I know how to get boot files from a server out on the network somewhere. This was called EtherBoot back in the day. And the problem with EtherBoot is it was very proprietary in how it did things. It would only work with certain kinds of boot servers and certain protocols. And so later that kind of got generified and became NetBoot. And that got further refined for consistency's sake across all NICs. And we support now what's called PXE boot, pre-boot execution environment. And it just means remote booting over the net. And it's really useful in a lot of different worlds. We'll talk about a few of them as we go on. So here's what's got to go on in this two-part process. Over in the PXE boot server, we have to have, down here at the bottom, a file system, excuse me, that holds a boot image, an ISO file. And it can hold more than one kind of ISO file. It might be Linux for Raspberry Pi. It might be Windows 10 32-bit. It might be Windows 11 Pro, whatever. And there's 47 different kinds of Linuxes out there. We don't necessarily need SSH and for doing SFTP, because the way we're going to transfer these bootable files, these bootable image files under PXE, is with Trivial File Transfer Protocol. Before we can do that, we have to give our client that's requesting this over the network boot an IP address. So we're going to run DHCP over there. So there's 4 files on this left-hand thing that really matter, 4 programs. There's DHCP, there's the Trivial File Transfer Protocol, there is a file system of some kind, and there are image files stored on that file system. Over on the right-hand side of this guy is the client. He's the one who says, hey, I need some boot image files. So he starts by booting up through the normal BIOS or UEFI process, and then he wakes up the NIC. All modern NICs have PXE support built onto them right now. It's built into the ROM. So that's called PXE or gPXE. And then he goes out on the net and says, I am a PXE client. Are there any servers out there who can help me out? Yes, I am. Well, I guess the first thing I need is an IP address. Got you covered. There's a DHCP server handing that out. Awesome. Now I have built into my ROM on my NIC, a TFTP file protocol. I'll get into that. Can you send me and set up a TFTP session? There's not much to set up there. Sure thing, got you covered. And along the way, this NIC will send some information about what it wants. I'm in this kind of a computer. This is the image that I need. I'm a Raspberry Pi single board computer. Send me Raspberry Pi OS. Send me Ubuntu for Raspberry Pi OS, whatever it might be. And then the PXE service finds the appropriate ISO file on the file system over there and then uses TFTP to send that down to the client. The client says, I'm going to pass this through the wires into the CPU and over to memory just as if I were a hard drive controller. So pretty slick stuff, huh? So a PXE boot server can run on just about any kind of a platform. Here's one running on an Ubuntu platform. And while all of these clients look the same, they don't have to be. So we're going to come back to that in a second. Here's one running on a CentOS platform. And they don't have to, all those clients don't have to be CentOS. They can be Windows clients. They can be Raspberry Pi clients. They can be Mac clients. They can be billions of different Linux clients. And so here's a PXE boot server that's doing exactly that. He says, I've got a couple of different ISO files in here. On the left, I've got CentOS boot image, a boot ISO file. And to provision the client on the right, we've got whatever that OS is, some kind of operating system that looks like it's got Wireshark built into it. These are the programs and files that we're going to put in a Linux-based PXE boot server. DNS mask, PXE Linux, SysLinux EFI, and Linux ISO. Just going to go over these at the 30,000 foot level. So here's that same slide we saw earlier, but now on the right-hand side, a little more detail on the boot PXE boot server. There's our DHCP, which is going to either run natively or in proxy mode. And it's going to have TFTP. One program is going to take care of all three of these things: DHCP, proxy DHCP, and trivial file transfer protocol. These slides will get a little more broken out. Here we go. So the one program that we're going to use in our PXE boot server to do all that is called DNS mask. DNS mask has built-in DHCP. In fact, that's what most people use it for most of the time. But it also has this DHCP proxy. And what that tells me, it says, I can have a client out there on a semi-isolated network who will make a DHCP call, and this server will hear the call, and he says, you know what? I've been programmed in such a way that I won't actually select from my own scope the IP address to pass out. I'll call the real network DHCP on behalf of the client and get one from their scope and pass it through. That's a DHCP proxy. And then DNS mask says, I've been programmed to be the heart and soul of a PXE boot server. So I'm going to have a built-in trivial file transfer protocol program built into me. All right, I got notes on that elsewhere. Let's go further down here. Checking my notes here. Okay, did that. Did that not make it? Let me check something. Yeah. Okay. Maybe we went there, maybe we didn't. Okay, catching up on my notes here. So DNS mask, amazing programs, got all these features and functions built into that. And so we looked at the DNS mask features that it can do. But it can't operate standalone. It says, look, I can give you an IP address either natively out of my own scope or by a proxy from some other DHCP server. And once we've got all that arranged, when we figure out what file you're going to get, I can send that to you via TFTP. So the next program that we've got running is PXE Linux. PXE Linux is kind of the manager process for remote booting. He handles and actually has his own bootloader, or he can use one that we're going to add here. And that kind of gets the process started. Just like you put in a partition bootloader or a volume bootloader off a local hard drive, we're going to have to do the same thing from here. We're going to have to put enough code into the client computer that says this is enough to get you started. There's a boot menu in there. That's going to provide a series of options for the client to select from. And this can be automated, or that menu can go down to the client and it can pick a different bootable image. And that boot menu is configured with this file called pxelinux.cfg. If we are going to boot UEFI instead of BIOS, and you're using a modern computer, you can use the internal UEFI BIOS. But if you're trying to do an old system that only has a BIOS boot system, we've got syslinux.efi. That will send down a UEFI boot environment just for those old computers that don't have UEFI. I didn't quiet my Discord servers. I see you guys all doing welcomes. Okay, so why do we use TFTP, Trivial File Transfer Protocol, to do these file transfers? I don't have a dedicated slide for that. Number one, because it's simple. It's Trivial File Transfer Protocol. It uses UDP, User Datagram Protocol, so there's no setup, there's no negotiating, there's no segments, there's no acknowledgments, there's not even a login. Once the two agree that they're going to use UDP port 69, one just starts shooting data out and the other one just starts receiving it. That's it. No back and forth of any kind. So we don't need logins, we don't need passwords. We simply get the client that says, send me them boot files. And down comes syslinux.efi, and then down comes the ISO image. So it's really practical, and again, that's built into DNS mask. Yeah, that's about it. Let's go back here for a sec. Okay, so I got a slide for this thing. So let's do a quick reminder for ourselves, the differences between BIOS booting, which is also known as legacy booting, and UEFI booting. In either case, we're going to start by sending some code to the CPU to wake it up. In BIOS and legacy booting, that's going to wake the CPU up in a 16-bit mode, and it's going to use a bootable file system that only understands a couple of partition types and only 4 partitions. And then we can do extended partitions, but it's very limited. The sizes are very limited. With UEFI, we wake the CPU up in a much more powerful mode, 32-bit. So it can handle a larger startup program, a larger BIOS, which we call the UEFI. And then we use GPT partitions, where there's about 2 billion possible partitions, and they're not limited in names by single drive letters. They don't have to have names. They can have volume names. It's a really amazing thing. So this syslinux EFI, when we send it down as the first set of boot files to the client, it says, hey, good news. If you've got a boot image on the remote system that is an old legacy boot image and it only likes BIOS booting, cool. That's built into me. But if you're going to download and install a bootable ISO that needs UEFI or EFI, I got you covered there too. That's the job of syslinux.efi. And then we have one or more image files on here. And they're, of course, going to get passed out the NIC in this server over the cable system into the NIC of the client. The client NIC sends it to the CPU, goes to the memory controller, goes into RAM, and then it starts executing back in the CPU. Folks, that's it. This was just a primer on PXE booting, but I wanted you to have, kind of some basic groundwork. We will do a show building a PXE boot server on some platform. Might be Raspberry, might be anything that I've got in here. Doesn't really matter. Should mention that if you're going to make a boot server on a Windows server, you can do that too. They used to use 4 different programs handled under a program under a server called an SCCM server, a Microsoft Systems Center Configuration Manager. And that had a whole bunch of different programs under it. And Microsoft has taken all of these things and conglomerated them into a single server product called Intune. You set up an Intune server, and all of that stuff that we saw separately in Linux is handled and managed, and all we've got to do is a little bit of configuration work. So, like all things Windows, it's graphical user interface oriented, and it's easy. There's a little bit of a learning curve like everything, but Intune replaces the old configuration manager, the endpoint analytics process, Microsoft Autopilot, Microsoft SCCM. You get the idea. But, we're much more focused on Linux here. I say that until you see what's coming up in some of the shows. It's going to be really cool. All right, I got about 3 more minutes here to wind this thing up. Who's using this? This is awesome in a classroom. Okay, I can have 10 classes a day with 30 students apiece and have individualized images that they can use a diskless computer and get a common image and use a common storage system remotely. They don't have to have any disks at all. They upload and download to the storage system. They save their own stuff to flash drives. We find these in businesses where the computers are all the same and the operating systems and the programs are all the same. Think call center, right? With hundreds or thousands of call operators who all use identical computers. They don't have local data. It all comes from On Central. This is awesome for cloud-based access. Both apps and storage are included there. So that's that. I have the tutorial that we're going to use later to build a PXE server, and from whence came a lot of information from tonight's show. I've just posted the link for that. I want to talk about upcoming shows for the next 3 that I have planned. These may flex a little bit, but next week's isn't, because we are ready to rock and roll. So next week, November 9th, Scott Jernigan joins us to talk cellular and wireless data performance in the real world. The following week, I think I'm going to do a real world Linux operations. We did the primer on that a week ago, and I really want to finish that up. The week after that, out of the Linux world, but sticking with IT, the Windows Sandbox. Ooh, look it up. I'm not going to do the explanation of the whole thing right now. Let's check final messages here, and then we'll close things up. Yeah, okay. So I'm picking up at 35 minutes past the hour, second right in the book. Yep. Dang. Since beginning, that's all I've known is TS, and you right in the middle of it all. Yeah, sorry about that. I would mostly still like to be there, but that's one of the reasons I've discovered. I didn't know this. I got 6 days notice, 4 working days. But now I know why they were heaping so much stuff on me for the last 3 or 4 weeks. It was, get these things done, let's get Rush being productive, and then off with his head. Do you proofread after you hit SNED? Sometimes. Yes, I you know what, I'm kind of famous for that. I will do a quick proofread, hit send, and then later I'll be looking at it again. It's like, oh my gosh, I screwed that up. And I can find 2 or 3 more errors, and I do fix after the fact, after I've posted. Screenshot taken of what? I'm terrified. Is PXE Boot and PXE like to install programs to new devices? Yes, you can do those. They're great. It's perfect for re-imaging. That's the way Microsoft's Intune does it, and you could use this to image anything. Yes. So SCCM is the older version, Intune is newer. Exactly correct. And I only learned that fairly recently, Jason. You had brought that up. I gave you some people who knew something about it on the Discord server, and then I ran into this. So I was really hoping that you would be here to hear that. So yeah, we've both learned something new about SCCM and Intune. Intune is the replacement for SCCM. All right, guys. Like using thin clients. That's exactly like using thin clients. That is exactly what it is. Thin clients are PXE booters. Well, it's been a fun hour. It's been newsworthy. I got a little bit of research for the show next week, but it's basically some scripting. And then Scott and I, we don't script. We just chat and we have notes to bolster things that we do. News to me. Cool. It was useful. My pleasure. All right, well, let's wind this puppy up for the day. As ever and always, I wish you a great rest of the week. Take care of each other. Take serious steps to stay healthy. And if at all possible, call or visit your parents. And never forget, technology is great, but the greatest resources we have are you and I. Good night. I will see you on ADRAMADA next Thursday. And this will not be the only weekly show that I do. I don't know if I'm going to do another live one, but I am certainly going to do another show every week that is not competitive with anybody, but it will be familiar. Okay, there's information that people need, and I love doing shows like that with information. So the company did announce that they have killed that program that I used to do every single week for all my life. If in fact that's truly killed, if I were to do it, it would not be competitive. So I will talk with them about that, or I won't. If they're not doing it, there's no reason that I can't. So there'll be more stuff. Anyways, good night. See you on ADRAMADA next Thursday, and in short order, at least one other weekly show. Until then, remember, how you do anything is how you do everything. And with that, eep, op, ork, later all.